the notion of retaining patients is an important topic. And we know in our profession, we have such an addiction to getting new patients. You open up any of our magazines, any of our trade journals, they all have ads, get new patients, marketing for new patients, constantly looking for new patients. And why do we need so many new patients? Because we have this churning going on where we're losing them on the back end. And I want to share with you today really some things that we found super successful in stopping the patient dropout. And obviously, if you don't lose patients, that means you're not as dependent on getting new patients. So not that there's anything wrong with new patients. I always want to emphasize that we love our new patients. But at the same time, it's really nice not to lose those people. So let's get started on the material today. You see my mouse there. Quick disclaimer statement I have to put in here. Because this webinar, we're going to talk about things that have to do with fees. That's the main reason I'm bringing this up, is any discussion of fees, just quickly note, that's not a recommendation of what you should be charging, nor are we suggesting that you should be charging what your buddy charges. This is all just for educational and examples. So you'll come up with your own fees, those types of things. It's just strictly for examples. Also, we mentioned this webinar that we are going to be interactive, and you'll see in the Zoom, many of you are probably familiar with this, there's two icons, one that's called chat and one that's called Q&A, and there always seems to be some confusion about that. Basically, when I ask you guys a question and I want you to respond, do us a favor, hit the chat, and then answer the questions in the chat section. If you want to ask us a question, we're monitoring the question. So if you have a question you want to ask about what we're talking about, then hit the Q&A and ask your question there, and then we'll see that and we'll be able to respond to it. So again, answering questions, use chat. Asking questions, use Q&A. A little background about ourselves here. It's always weird talking about yourselves, but I just want to give you a quick little background. You'll see Holly and I there, both been on the cover of some magazines, the American Chiropractor I was on, and Holly's been on the cover of the Chiropractic Assistant magazine. I know she was always giving out autographs. She's always asking people if they want her autograph. But we were put on the covers not because of any special reason other than the fact that we're experts in this topic. And both of those magazines are always looking for content. And in fact, I know this current issue of the current Chiropractic magazine, Assistant magazine, Holly, you have an article in there right now, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if you have a copy of it right there you want to hold up.
I actually do. So, here we go.
There you go. And if you want to see read the article, I'm pretty sure we can drop the link. We have a link to the posting of that article. I know it's a great article that you just put. I read it through, and it's actually some great information. So finally, you're putting out some good information.
Finally, oh my gosh.
So anyway, a little background about us. We've been at this a long time. Actually, it's been well over 2 decades now where we've been teaching this stuff, and just decided to share with you. Here's a back in the day picture. You see little Holly there in the middle, and there's me on the far right with the funny looking mustache. This is in front of my chiropractic office. For those you don't know, I practice as a chiropractor for almost 20 years now. I don't practice anymore. I retired in 2011 to dedicate my time, full time to running cash practice along with Holly, and just because there's just no time to do both. And but back in the day, let me just give you a little back history here. What gives us really the expertise to be sharing concepts with you today? So when I launched, my practice in 1994. I was a young kid out of school, 1994, like a lot of us, and I opened a practice called the Chiropractic Wellness Center. And that's a common name we see today, but back in 1994, the word wellness was not a big part of chiropractic. And pretty much everybody thought of chiropractic in the early 90s for back pain, neck pain, headaches, car accidents. In fact, if you opened up the marketing medium of the time, which was the Yellow Pages back then, you opened up the Yellow Pages, any ad you saw for chiropractors was basically an ad of either 2 cars crashing into each other for PI, or was a guy bent over with lightning bolts flying out of his ass for, back pain. Basically, that's what marketing of chiropractic was back then. And the other thing about chiropractic in the early 90s was, especially in Southern California, was everybody that came in was coming in with what's called a new thing called an HMO, managed care. And I wasn't part of any of that. So here I am, a young kid out of school. 9 out of 10 people who walked into my practice had an HMO that I was not part of, and I was trying to do a wellness model while everybody was thinking of car accidents and back pain. And the point I'm trying to get across here is it was a real challenge. I really faced a lot of challenges in the early days of my practice. In fact, it was so challenging that I almost gave up on practice about a year and a half into practice. I was ready to give up on it and sell it and go back to what I was doing prior to chiropractic, which was finishing up my engineering degree. But I didn't. I ended up sticking it through and eventually figured out really what it took to have people get care, enroll in care, stay under care, and follow through. To eventually, when I sold my practice in 2011, my average patient had been with me over 300 visits over the course of 5 years, which was not an easy thing to accomplish. But what I realized was there were things that were necessary in order to plug the holes in the practice, the things that let people leave. And hence the topic today is stopping patient dropout. That's ultimately what I figured out through trial and error research and practice. And that's what I'm going to share with you, some of the key concepts that we learned in practice to stop that from happening. In fact, the story that I just shared with you, some of you may be aware of this already, some of you not. We did a movie last year called The Calling Movie, or The Calling. And you can go to thecallingmovie.com. It's actually a 40-minute movie. It's a short movie on the story of being called to serve as a chiropractor. And we find all the time that people are really inspired. In fact, we just had someone, the leader of a software company who contacted us, a chiropractic software company who contacted us saying, I watched your movie and I was so inspired. I loved it. And anyway, long story short, we'd love for you to watch it. You can, at your free time, spend 30, 40 minutes and you can enjoy that movie. All right, so let's get going. And you'll notice at the top, I have a little reminder of where you can respond to the question, the chat there, a little cheat sheet there. So I would love to hear from you guys right now. Before I get into this, what are some common reasons patients drop out? I want to hear from you. I know a bunch of reasons, but I'm curious in your minds, and Holly's going to take a look at this as well as I, what are some common reasons you believe, and feel free to list as many as you want, that you believe patients drop out in your practice? Because it's important to understand the whys before we try to solve those. So let me bring up on my screen as well. Where do I have that? There we go. The chat. Holly, I don't see it. Oh, there it is. Hold on. There it is. And I see people responding. I know, Holly, you got stuff in front of you. So I hear people saying, I feel better. Okay, that's true. The pain going away is a reason people will drop out. Thanks, Tanya. Or they can't afford it. Yeah, that's true too. Money is a subject. And I'll be frank with that one. It's not so much they can't afford it. It's the fact that you've reminding people of money over and over. That's one of the things that we also saw. Now, granted, there are people who can't afford it. That's true, but that's not the majority of people. Insurance stopped. Yes, absolutely. Insurance stopping is another common one. We'll see this where practices use the insurance with the hopes at a later time of converting them to cash, and we never see that work. That's like trying to convert PI people to cash, or work comp people to cash, or insurance people to cash. It just doesn't work really well in a routine. Oh, here's another one. Patients feel like you just want them to keep coming back. They don't know they're getting any benefits, so they just get the sense of, oh, once you go, you got to go the rest of your life type feeling, that negative feeling that goes along with it. Anybody else want to share some things? I'd love to hear more from you guys. I know there's a bunch of you on here right now. You've talked about this with your staff. What are reasons you think if people drop out? What are common reasons? Come on, I know there's some others out there. Come on, guys. I know you got this. I know another one saying pain went away. Yes, that is probably the two biggest ones we see. And I'll move on here. Pain going away and the insurance stopping. And I see that coming up by a number of you guys. Those are the most common reasons people drop out of care. All right, so let's move on from here. And here's one thing we see, that when we talk about having a successful, profitable practice, they have one thing in common, and that is they have loyal patients. And loyal patients is just basically saying, I have people who stay, they're not dropping out. And hence the whole purpose of this topic is to figure out what we need to do to stop people from dropping out of care. And why is patient loyalty so important? Well, just from a business perspective, forget about the clinical side of things for just a moment and the clinical benefits of people following through. But what about just from a business perspective? Strictly that alone, we know, and you've probably seen this before, it costs 6 to 7 times more to get a new patient or a new customer or a new client than it does to keep one. That your cost of acquisition is 6 to 7 times higher than it is just to keep your people. So it's a very expensive proposition to always be looking for new people. Let me ask you this question, docs. And I'll often ask this from a live stage when I'm doing a live talk, and I'll ask people to raise their hands. If I was on stage right now and I said to the audience, and I said to you, if there was an adjustment that I could teach you right now, a chiropractic adjustment, that you will always get better clinical results, no matter what the problem is with the patient, no matter what your technique, no matter what else is going on, if there's one adjustment, and you always do this one adjustment, and you'll always get at least 10% better results, would you be interested in learning that adjustment? And every hand always goes up. Yes, I would love to, because we want to do as clinicians, we want to do the best we can clinically for our patients. That's why we're chiropractors, right? We want to help our people. Now, my question to you is this. Would you agree that one of the reasons we do not realize the best results with a patient, or they don't get the best results is because their failure to follow through with our recommendations. Not that we're doing anything wrong. They fail to follow through with either sticking with the treatment plan or not following our recommendations. And if I was in front of a live audience, I would see every one of you shaking your head yes right now, because that's what I've done this many times, and that's what I see. So I'm going to assume you guys watching right now are agreeing with me that if patients drop out, they don't realize the best results. So if there's an adjustment you are willing to learn in order to get better clinical results, what if I teach you some things you could do to just get people to follow through better, and you'll get better results? Forget about the business side of it. Forget about the financial aspects of it. Just clinically, you will end up having happier patients getting better results merely because they're not dropping out of care. So this isn't just about money. Certainly not. It's certainly not about cash and all that stuff. It's about delivering the best chiropractic care, the best services that you can, and get the best results. And I want to teach you the things you can do to help patients realize that. So everybody's a winner here. Doctors, you're a winner because your practice grows and you don't have to stress about new people all the time. And your patients are winners because they're going to get better results as a result of patients following through and them not dropping out of care. So what does it mean to you to have loyal patients? I would like, again, in the chat, that's why I have a little chat box up there, and get your responses. What does it mean to you personally? What would it mean? Let me ask you this. If patients stayed under care and didn't drop out, ask yourself, what would that mean to you? I know for me, it would mean, okay, I got better results. It might mean I could take vacations with my family more often because I don't have to stress about always getting new business or new patients. What does it mean to you on a business level, and then even on a personal level, to have loyal patients? If you would do us a favor and put those in the comments below in the chat section. Again, we're only going to see that. It's not shared among everybody. Put that in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. What does it mean to you to have loyal patients? And I'll shut up here for just a moment and see what you guys have to say. All right, so I'm seeing that patients enroll in care plans. Okay, so that's what it means to you, is to have a patient enroll in a care plan. I see a doc wrote here, oh, I'll have more people actually realizing lifetime care. That's wonderful. Okay, so I think some of you are being a little shy about answering the question, but nonetheless, the point is that you should be thinking right now, what is the end result for you if you have patients being loyal to you? So let's move on here. All right, so here's what we want to talk about today. I want to introduce a new concept to you. To create patient loyalty, you want to focus on what we call a successful patient journey. A patient journey. Think of from the moment the patient enters your office to the entire time they're with you, there's a journey they're on. And the question is, are you having a successful patient journey? And I'm introducing to you something to the profession right now. This is something brand new that we want to share with you to give you the concept of. This looks like a game board, right? This is an outline of a patient journey. We've taken the time to illustrate all the steps along the way, and we're not going to go in detail with this today, but I'm going to point out some of the things we're going to be doing today on this journey. This is everything from the moment the patient calls, to the moment they have a report of findings, to the enrollment process, to them transitioning to wellness. The big takeaway message of this is the journey is everything from them calling you to the moment they transition to lifetime wellness care. And step 12 there on the far right represents them transitioning to a lifetime of wellness. Many offices believe they won the game, if you want to think of the game, as I got a prepay, or I got them to sign up for care, or I closed the deal, those types of things. And I hate that term, close the deal, by the way. But the point I'm getting at is that the game is not won when you sign up patients. The game is won when they've transitioned to wellness. And when I say they've won, the patient won. They're now benefiting from the true benefits of the chiropractic story. The only thing I want to really kind of point out on the screen here is that you'll see on the game board here, there's 3 colors basically along the board. This yellow section on the board, then this brown, and then the purple. The yellow section basically represents the journey of new patient going through their day 1, day 2, from the moment they call to the moment they enroll in care. The brown section here represents the treatment plan, the time they're under care, from whether it's 2 months, 4 months, 8 months, a year, whatever it is, it represents the time you're caring for the patient. And the purple section here represents the transition from the initial program onto wellness care. And we're going to hit on a couple of these points today as we go through this exercise of stopping patient dropout. These little bombs you see on here, guess what those represent? Those represent all the different types of situations that can occur that cause people to leave, to basically leave the practice. They're danger on the journey, basically. Think of it like you're going through the secret forest, I guess you could say. You know, basically it's things that can happen that blow up the process. And we're going to address some of those today. All right, so let's get into, we talk about these 4 key concepts of, you know, stopping patient dropout. Another way of saying that is 4 pillars of patient loyalty. So let's go through them. 4 of them. Number 1 is loyal patients need to hear from you frequently. We often talk about this as patient education. That's what we often refer to as patient education, but it's more than education. It's just them hearing from you on a regular basis. This is one of those key concepts that I didn't invent this. It's just what, in fact, none of these did I really invent that I'm sharing with you. These are just things that many people have done over the years. We've just formulated it into a process here. Number 2 is loyal patients need feedback on how they're progressing with care. This is where we talk about doing scans or doing things to give people feedback, whether it's x-rays or progress exams or whatever it is, but you're doing regular progress exams to give people feedback on how they're progressing. The failure to do that is one of the reasons people will drop out of care after 2 or 3 months. It's one of the things we observe. In fact, you might ask the question to patients, if someone comes to you who's been to another chiropractor and they are not going back to the prior doctor and they're not coming to you, and if you ask them the question, why are you coming to me now? Why are you not going back to the previous doctor? Oftentimes you'll hear them say things like, well, I just don't know how I was doing over there, or I just felt like they wanted me to keep coming back. And if you've heard those things, in all likelihood, that previous doctor failed number 2 here. They weren't doing regular progress exams. They weren't communicating to the patient how they were doing clinically in an effective manner. So that's pillar number 2. Pillar number 3 is loyal patients need convenience, ease, and a frictionless payment experience. What we're basically saying is you got to make it really easy for them to get in and out and really easy to pay. If you have any inconveniences in your practice, that sabotages patient loyalty. And you'll notice that has nothing to do with chiropractic. That has nothing to do with the message of chiropractic or anything. It's just strictly a business model. And you'll see this in all businesses, quite frankly, that especially nowadays with people so used to paying for things on their phone and Amazon delivering things, and people are just used to ease and convenience. If there's anything inconvenient about your practice, that will destroy your patient loyalty. In fact, years ago, probably about 10 years ago, I set up a camera in my chiropractic office and I videotaped, with their permission, of course, interviews of them, asking them all kinds of questions about their experience in the practice. And one of the questions I would ask them is you've been here for years. Why do you keep coming? And why do you keep, staying under care? And one of the common things I heard from people, one of the most common words being used over and over and over, whether it was due to our location, our appointment scheduling, our payment process, whatever it was, their payment plans, it all had to do with the word convenience came up over and over and over. It was a routine for us to hear patients, oh, it's convenient to see you. It's, you make it really easy, that type of thing. So that's a really important value that people place on coming to see your practice. So if you have in your practice anything that's inconvenient, you got to remove that. That destroys your loyalty. Inconvenience. People sit around waiting 10, 15 minutes to see the doctor. That's a challenge in today's environment. So look at all kinds of things that would be considered inconvenient. The 4th thing is loyal patients need a game plan. And when I may say a game plan is they need to know what the plan is. Is this a one-time visit? Is it going to be 6 months? Is it 3 months? Is it what is the plan? What is the financial plan? What is the scheduling plan? Like, they don't want to be left in the dark and they don't want any surprises. They want to know what the plan is. So we call that they need a game plan. Another way of thinking about this, and actually before I say that, is number 3 and 4 is what we're going to primarily, I'm going to go through all 4 of these in more detail, but number 3 and number 4 are what we're going to primarily focus on today. And the reason is because, quite frankly, number 3 and 4 have the greatest impact on stopping patient dropout. They all have an impact. They're all important, but 3 and 4 have the greatest impact. So I want to make sure those are the ones we address primarily today for you guys. So another way of thinking of these 4 is contact. There's an easy way to remember. Contact, feedback, convenience, and game plan. Contact, feedback, convenience, and game plan. Those are the 4 key areas that you must address in your practice to stop patient dropout and have patient loyalty. We also, again, we're going to be focusing on those, and you'll see these symbols we use quite a bit. That @ symbol is obviously an email symbol for regular contact, the heart being feedback, you're monitoring people, giving them feedback. The little circle there is convenience, talking about you're making things easy, whether it's your payments or your scheduling. And game plan is you've calculated out a plan. You'll see those icons being used. But nonetheless, those are the 4 key things that if you put attention and detail on, or attention and focus on in your practice, you will see that your patient dropout will become less and less and less. So how do you measure patient loyalty? And again, we have the chat box there. If you guys want to respond to that, that would be great. If not, well, either way, I'm just going to answer for you. How do you measure patient loyalty? Well, quite frankly, you measure patient loyalty with patient retention. You measure patient retention. That is the measurement of your patient loyalty. So if you ask the question, how good is my patient loyalty? Well, look at your PVA, your patient retention, and that'll give you an indication of your patient loyalty.
Dr. Bodzin, I want to ask you just a quick question about measuring your PVA. I get asked all the time, well, and one thing you haven't shared with our audience yet is your PVA in practice was over 300. So patient visit average was over 300. That's 24 times the national average of 12.
Yes.
So I just want to ask you really quick, how do you determine PVA?
Okay, so I'm glad you asked that, because it's not the traditional formula out there that most people use, which is most chiropractors use this formula that makes no sense. They basically say how many visits divided by the number of new patients. And the reason I say that makes no sense is because I have an engineering background. Let me just say that I know math really well. It doesn't work. Okay, so let me use the example. If you had a bunch of visits you had of people, but you had 0 new patients, the math formula basically says take that divided by 0 means you have infinity of a PVA. So from a purely mathematical standpoint, it doesn't work. The other reason I'll say it is, let me use more of an analogy. If I ask you each right now to say, okay, I want to have you go out and sell lemonade in front of your house, okay, like a kid. You're going to go out and sell lemonade out on the street, and you're going to sell lemonade Monday through Friday. Not the weekends. Weekends are off. Monday through Friday, you're going to sell lemonade. And I asked you the question of, on average, how many lemonades do you sell per day? And how would you calculate that? You would say, well, I take up the total lemonade I've sold all week, all 5 days. So I sold 20 cups of lemonade. And one day you sold 20, and one day you sold 15, and one day you sold 25. And each day you sold a different amount. The average would be you take the total lemonades you sold divided by 5 days. And that would tell you on average how many you sold per day. But what you didn't do is say, well, how many did I sell divided by the number of people, or the number of new people that showed up? It had nothing to do with how many new people showed up. It had anything to do with the volume that you sold divided by the days in that case. What I'm getting at is when you do a PVA in your practice, the right way of doing it is you go into your practice and you say, let me look at my active patients. So you might say, give me all my patients that signed up in care January through March of 2020. And you're going to look at that cohort of people, that group of people. And you're going to say, today, let me add up all of the visits those people have had. So you'd look up all the people who came to you from January, February, March, let's say. You add up all their visits, and then you simply divide it by that number of people. Not how many new people show up, but that number of people. So let's say there was 20 patients that showed up. You add up all their visits and divide it by that 20, regardless of whether they're still seeing you or not. And that'll give you an average number of visits people see you. And if you do this over an extended period of time, you might look at like all the people who joined in the year 2019, or all the people who came in 2018, and you grab that group of people and you add up all the visits those people have had divided by those number of people, and that'll tell you on average how long those people stay. And obviously, the further back you go, the depending on the group of people you have, you might do an event, for example, where you got a group of people from a specific event, and those people have a higher retention versus another group of people you do this. If you want to look at an average kind of across all the board, you could just go to your patient files and say, give me 100 random files from my practice of active patients. Take those 100 active files, add up all the visits they had, divided by those 100 files, and that'll tell you on average how long people stay. It has nothing to do with how many new people show up. That's the main thing I want to share with you right there. It's a more accurate measurement of that. So that's how we do it. That's the more proper way of doing it. I think that formula that people traditionally use of, total visits divided by new people. I think some practice management person practically back in the 1980s, came up with that formula, not really with a math background or a stats background, and just made it up. So but it's not an accurate formula.
So there you go. You now have the proper way of doing it. So I'll just tell you, well, you're going to talk about it later, so I'll shut my mouth. So.
Yeah. So what does patient loyalty look like? This is what it looks like. I want to show you what this is. This is a picture from my old office, and it shows back in the day taking Polaroid pictures. We used to take pictures of our patients when they got to their 50th adjustment, and they're smiling, and we would reward them with a big certificate saying congratulations, and we put it up on the wall. We call it the wellness wall. But you'll see there it says, on this one here, it says 50 adjustments, then 100 and 200 and 300 down here. And then it would say 4 and 5 and 6 and 700 and 800. And as people were with me longer, we would move their picture along the wall, and we'd had literally hundreds of these photos. That's what ultimately will happen to a practice, is you'll literally have dozens, if not hundreds of people who are with you for many years with hundreds and hundreds of adjustments over the course of a long time. Now, I want to emphasize here, we're not just saying they're coming in for 50 adjustments in 5 weeks. This isn't over-treating. This is someone going through a care plan to get clinical results and then eventually transitioning to a wellness program where they're coming in once a month or once a week or twice a month. And over many years, those visits obviously add up. I know all of you watching right now have those patients who've been with you for a long time, and they've been with you literally for hundreds of visits. The question is that the minority of your practice, or is that the majority of your practice? And our goal here is to make that the majority of your practice, where people complete a treatment plan and eventually transition to a wellness program. Assuming that's your model of practice, which is 95% of chiropractors, that's what they want to do. They want to have people complete a plan of care and eventually transition onto a maintenance or wellness program. So let's get into kind of the nitty-gritty of this now. Your patient retention is significantly impacted by your patient's game plan and how convenient you make collecting fees. I mentioned that earlier when I showed the 4 points. The two key things of a game plan and convenience have the greatest impact on your patient loyalty and your patient retention. So I want to go through right now some different examples of game plans that chiropractors often use in practice, along with different ways doctors collect their money, and show you how it impacts your PVA, your patient visit average, or your retention. In fact, based upon a doctor telling me how they run their practice, it's pretty predictable what your PVA is. So let's go through this. The first one is going to be, and as I go through each of these, the convenience improves. So you'll see we have a game plan, we have the way you collect it, and from the bottom up, we're basically saying is that convenience is getting easier and easier and easier with each of these models. So let's go through. The first is the per visit model. What I mean by this is that you have no game plan. In essence, a patient comes in and there's no plan at all. It's just simply, let me take care of you visit by visit. There is no, let's see you for 6 months or 4 months, or there's no treatment plan outlined. It's basically the person's getting care visit by visit. So that's no game plan at all. And obviously the collection method is going to be pay per visit. And that's, that makes the most sense, right? You're only doing visit at a time, so you're going to collect per visit. And we see in these practices, their PVAs, as a general rule, we don't see them higher than about 12. Maybe a little bit, maybe around up to 15 at the most, but generally they're stuck right around 12. And it's no surprise, this is the national average. That the national average PVA in America right now is about 12 visits. This is it. Your ceiling you hit just peaks out there. No matter what else you do, you could be doing the best patient education in the world. You could be doing backflips. I don't care what else you're doing. If your model is per visit, you tend to get stuck around 12. Now, there's always an exception. There's always the one doctor who says, well, I'm per visit, my PVA is 20. Okay, great. There's an exception, but that's not the general rule. What I want to share with you are what we generally see across the board for most practices when we're doing these different models. So a per visit game plan typically is a per visit pay model, and typically your PVA gets stuck around 12 visits. The next game plan is what we call exam to exam. This is a lot of chiropractors. This is what the doctors would basically say at a report of findings to someone. Let's get you started with care. I'm going to reevaluate you in 30 days or next month, whatever they say, and we'll take it from there. Meaning they never tell the patient up front how long the care is expected, how frequent, nothing beyond, let's get you started, I'll reevaluate you next month, and we'll basically make decisions from there what to do. And logically it makes sense, but ultimately it sabotages things. And what ends up happening is every re-exam, the doctor ends up needing to talk to the patient about continuing with care, because as far as the patient is concerned, they don't know they need to continue generally. Or if you told them, they're just thinking re-exam, oh, am I done? So what ends up happening is you end up from a business model, typically having patients buy 10 or 12 visits at a time. So there's somebody, I'm sure there's someone watching this webinar right now who's doing this. You do a report of findings, you tell them, let's get started. They buy enough visits to get from now to the first re-exam. So we call that a block of visits. You know, they might buy 10 visits or 12 visits they'll prepay for. And at the end of that block of visits, it's time to do another re-exam. And at that re-exam, what does the doctor generally say to the patient? Oh, you need more care. The patient goes, okay, I guess if you say so. And they buy another block of visits. And what ends up happening is after 2 or 3 blocks of visits, after 2 or 3 re-exams, when the patient's feeling better, and we got done saying earlier, one of the biggest reasons people drop out is because they're, you know, the pain goes away, the symptoms go away. They get to a point where they're like, I'm feeling better, I don't want to continue. And we end up seeing people drop out after 2 or 3 blocks of visits. The other side effect of doing blocks of visits is every doctor I talk to who does this always tells me, and I don't use the word always very often, but in this case, it's almost always says they always feel like they're selling the patient at a re-exam, meaning every time a re-exam happens, besides doing the re-exam, they know the patient needs to buy more care. So there's always this sense, I got to educate them, I got to do things to convince them to buy the next form. So they always feel this sense of pressure internally that they're trying to sell more visits, which is not a great way to practice. It doesn't feel great. Generally, we see these practices get stuck around 24 to 36 visits. No matter what else you do, they get stuck based upon this game plan and that collection method. Another way of calling a game plan and a collection method, it's your business model, basically. That business model of doing exam to exam, block of visits, you get stuck around 24 to 36 visits. The next game plan is my favorite, or leading to my favorite, and that is the care plan. That's where, at a report of findings, you tell the patient the comprehensive care plan. You tell them up front, this is going to be 6 months of care, or 8 months, or a year, 4 months, or whatever they need clinically. It's not the same for everybody. It's whatever they need, and you're giving them the everything they need: re-exams, progress, care, adjustments, therapies, whatever it is you do, new X-rays. All of that's built into the care plan. But the collection method you're doing is prepay. And this is very common in our profession, that doctors want to do prepays. In fact, we hear doctors excited, I did 12 prepays this month, or whatever it is, or 10 prepays, and they are excited about getting prepays. And it's an okay method. It does work if you're good at sales, and there's a number of doctors in our profession that love to close deals and do sales and all that kind of stuff. But it's a result of doing prepays. And I'm just going to spend a moment here on this because I don't want to call it one of my pet peeves, but I want to expose something. If you were to go and ask the average person on the street, do they prepay for things in their life? Do they prepay for their furniture, for their TVs, for their cars? 95% of people do not prepay for anything. So, especially here in America, they're used to doing things on payments. That's the way they do things. So if you in your practice are of the mindset, I'm going to get people to prepay, in essence, what you're saying is, I'm going to get 9 out of 10 new patients who come to me who don't normally prepay for things, and I'm going to talk them into doing it. And in essence, this is what you're doing. And when you do that, you run the risk of creating some negative outcomes as a result of talking people into doing something they don't normally do. The other challenge with prepays is that it really sabotages your cash flow in your practice. Listen, I'm not against them. I just want to emphasize it's not the best model. And what we see in these practices, they generally get stuck around 50 to 75 as a PVA, which some of you might be saying, oh, that's amazing. That's a great PVA. It is. It's better than the others, but it's not the best you can have. The next model is still using the care plan. You're still recommending a care plan, but your collection method, instead of it being a prepay, it's a monthly auto debit. It's where you're doing a monthly recurring payment. Now, this is a pretty common thing to know these days. When we started doing this 10, 15 years ago, that notion was brand new. It wasn't a new idea at all, and we had a lot of success with it. Nowadays, you're seeing monthly payments, subscription models, I guess you would say, in almost everything now, whether it be your gym, whether it be subscriptions to software, whether it be subscriptions to clubs and memberships, or whatever it is, this model, even Disneyland does subscriptions now. The point is that in your practice, if you have a business model that offers a subscription-like model, when I say subscription, I want to clarify, I'm not referring to a membership where people pay you a monthly fee and come as much or as little as they want. That's not what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is you still have a recommended care plan with a designated, defined set of services, but the payments are being made in a monthly fashion on an automated basis. And we see in these practices, they have the PVAs, the highest PVAs, absolutely the highest, 150 plus. And this is what was the key thing in my own experience, was that when I put people on care plans and then offered them payment options that included monthly payments, and we automated that, That's where this PVA skyrocketed to being a well over 300 visit PVA. And that's really the outline we see. These are the most common business models we see in practices. And it becomes, like I said, very predictable to see where the glass ceiling of visits are in a practice based upon the model in practice. And you'll notice none of this has anything to do with how you're educating your patients, whether you're doing patient workshops. All those things are valuable things to do to educate your patients and provide great service and kill them with kindness and all of the things we love to do really well with our patients from a business perspective and clinically. This is all just simply the structure of the business model that has this much impact. So in review, here's what we're going to kind of review before we go into a little more detail. The goal we outline is to have a successful practice. Whatever you define as successful, that is the goal. The method of having a successful practice that I'm teaching you today is we do that by reducing patient dropout. So in my definition of a successful practice, whatever that is, the method of accomplishing that is to reduce the patient dropout. In this particular case, how do we do that? We focus on patient loyalty. When you do things to make loyal patients, that will reduce patient dropout. The strategy for doing patient loyalty is to focus on the patient journey. That's the actual mechanics. You focus on the mechanics of the patient journey. It will lead to patient loyalty, and having patient loyalty will reduce your patient dropout, which will lead to a successful practice. Think of it that's what I'm trying to get across here. Now, there are systems we use in the patient journey in order to accomplish patient loyalty. And that is those systems focus on contact, feedback, convenience, and a game plan. If you apply systems in your practice that regularly let you be in contact, that regularly give patients feedback, that make it convenient, and that create a game plan for your patients, that will allow you to have a successful patient journey. And when you have a successful patient journey, you will have loyal patients. And when you have loyal patients, that'll reduce patient dropout. And when you reduce patient dropout, you'll have a successful practice. You see where I'm going with this? Trying to break it down so you really understand how important it is to focus on what I'm about to share with you right now. The results is you'll end up having high patient retention. So we say, how do you measure your patient loyalty? By having good patient retention. Make note of this. Maybe take a picture of this or capture this screen right here. This is really the focus. Your goal, whatever you define as a successful practice, whether it means you're making more money, whether it means you have more free time, whether it means your patients are getting better results, whatever you want to define as successful practice, the methodology is reduce patient dropout. Just reduce it, and that you'll have.
I want to chime in from a CA's perspective. When these things are put into place, when systems are put into place to get contact, feedback, convenience, and give patients a game plan, it not only makes it for the patient to have a successful chiropractic experience in the practice because they're getting results, they enjoy coming into the practice, but the team and the doctor working together with that synergistic vibe, like it creates so much joy and job satisfaction. Like that's how we win, by making sure our patients ultimately win on their journey. So
absolutely. Yeah. It even plays true in today. Like I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this webinar, like last night when we were first starting, I was saying last night I was sitting there and responding to Google reviews we got. And if you look at Cash Practice's Google reviews, you're going to see 9 out of 10 reviews, people are gushing about how we take care of them. Not, they say nice things about the growth of their practice, and they say nice things about the software, but they gush over our service and the connection we have. What Holly just said about the joy, that's what comes across when you do this. These same strategies are what we do as a company at Cash Practice. We do the same thing, no different than a practice. We have goals, we have methods, we have focus, strategy, systems, and results. Same thing in running any business. But the point I'm saying is that it comes across. Read our reviews and you'll see we're not just saying that. It's in real life, that's the response that ends up happening. All right, so what do the results look like? Well, when you measure results and you measure retention, ultimately what you end up seeing is your cash revenue grows exponentially in your practice. What I'm showing you about to show you here is stats from as an example of one of our clients in Cash Practice that shows their cash collections and how they grow year after year. And what ends up happening is year after year, revenue keeps growing. It's not up and down. It doesn't plateau. Every year it keeps going up. And the only practices absolutely across the board that do this are the ones that continuously add new patients and don't lose them on the back end. This isn't representative of an insurance practice or a cash-based practice or a PI practice, or it's not representative of a pediatric practice or a family. It's not representative of the style of practice. It's representative of a practice that adds new clients, new patients, and doesn't lose them. That's the only practice that will do this. So instead of you getting to a point in your practice growing and plateauing, which was what most practices do, imagine this is from 2012. This is almost not quite a decade. This is 7 years here, and I'm sure once we look at 2020, when the year's out, we'll see what those numbers are for this in this example. But this is pretty common. We see in our members that just practice after practice, month after month, year after year, they continually grow. And this is just the financial outcome of having better retention. So if that's interesting to you, I find that very fascinating. Here's something else I want to share with you that we got to experience this year in 2020. We know there was a shutdown, right? So at the beginning of the shutdown from the whole pandemic that was going on, we know in March and April, we weren't sure what was going to be happening. It was all new. And what we observed was the following. This is kind of an interesting thing we looked at when we looked at our stats across our thousands of clients using our systems, Cash Practice. We were able to see the following. So this was as of April 6th in 2020 this year. So that's right after the pandemic hit, March, April. And what we observed was the office is doing the pay-per-visit. Like I shared earlier in the slides here, pay-per-visit. What we saw almost immediately was a 50% drop in their collections. So that doesn't mean, what I'm getting at here is every one of our clients, they have not only doing care plans, but they have lots of people on pay-per-visit. And what we observed was the pay-per-visit payments dropped in half like that. So we know that practices that are not doing care plans, that are just doing one-time payments, overnight, they saw their revenue literally go down at least 50% just from this shutdown. And that's because people were not coming in. They weren't, that was the business model. It's very sensitive to outside influences. And in any case, a major outside influence, which was things were being shut down. Compare that to people that were on these monthly auto debits, the recurring payments, as I shared earlier in the slide, saying that the PVA is much higher, that it leads to loyal patients, that it leads to higher retention. What we saw with recurring payments, there was less than a 3% decrease in collections. Let that sink in for a second. Imagine you were in practice where you either had a 50% drop or you had a 3% drop. Which would you rather have? I think that it's a rhetorical question. Obviously, you'd rather have the 3%. And that's what we observed, is that the raw data showed in our stats that all of the recurring payments going on, all of the numbers showed that the recurring payments only dropped about 3%, a little less, and that one-time payments dropped 50%. You might have experienced that in your own practice. My point being is that the retention, the loyalty was much higher when we had people on those monthly payments. And the data supports that. Now, here we are in the month of October, and we've been able to see, and you've probably observed this in your practice, that in May and June, May was still down. June, things started coming back. By July, everything was back to pre-COVID status. And now we're actually seeing collections for many of our practices are way above even where they were before. That's a whole other topic of why things are busier now than it was before. I honestly believe it's because people are looking for taking care of themselves more. They have more time on their hands to go visit the doctor. They're probably working at home more at poor desks, so they're hurting themselves, or they're out in the yard working more and they're hurting themselves more, whatever it may be. But we're seeing practices are busier now than they've ever been. It's really, I'll jokingly say, as a speaker who speaks on stage, every speaker does this, and I'm guilty of it too. Oh, it's never been a better time to be a chiropractor. Like we've all said it, right now is the best time ever. And I'm saying to you right now, literally, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart, now has never been a better time, because literally people are looking to take care of themselves. They're looking for things to improve their immune system and their health. Seriously, now you got to get the message out that you're there to help people. Okay. So results, care plans combined with convenient payment options or convenient payments are the foundation of building high loyalty. When I say the foundation, I mentioned there's 4 things, but if you think of the foundation of a building, everything else is built upon care plans. I mean, in order to stay in regular contact with people, generally they're under care. In order to give people feedback on how they're doing, that assumes they're under care. So they're going to be on a care plan in order for you to do these other things. So now let's get into kind of the nitty gritty of what it takes to build a care plan. I know some of you on this right now are probably asking, all right, let's get into it. Like, how do we build a care plan if we want to do that? So that's what I'm going to share with you right now. And the slide I'm going to show with you right now, we could probably spend a good 40 minutes on this topic alone, but we're not going to today because we just don't have the time in this webinar. So I'm going to give you an overview of this. In essence, when it comes to building out care plans, step one is you have a fee for your service. So we're going to just make up a fee of $70 as an example, and you have a service called an adjustment. So in this case, you're seeing on the left, we're saying you have $70 times 30 adjustments for your care plan that you're recommending. It could be whatever. It could be 40 visits. It could be 50. It could be 20. Whatever it is. In this example, I'm saying it's $70 in services times 30 visits came to $2,100. Let's just use that as an example. And you see here it says no discount. What I mean by that is that these are your fees. And this isn't a webinar right now on compliance. That's a 40-minute webinar in itself. But I'll just mention this. You have a fee, and that fee is not discounted. It's a full fee, and that's what you charge as a full service. The next step of this is we say we're going to provide a discount on top of this. Now, in this case, you see it says a 20% contracted DMPO discount. Again, I don't have the time now to go into all the details, but basically take away this message. If you're going to do discounts on your services, a couple rules to follow. Number one is you only discount non-covered services. There's never a discount applied to anything that's being billed to insurance or to deductible. That's rule number one. Rule number two is if you're going to do discounts, if you want to do your own discounts, meaning you're going to just do what we call a prompt pay or a time of service discount, the cap on that discount is 15%. No more than 50%. That comes from the OIG, the Office of the Inspector General from the U.S. federal government. 15% is the cap you're going to do on that. In this case, you see I'm showing a 20% discount, and I'm doing that using what's called a DMPO, a discount medical plan organization. If you have questions about that, please let us know after the fact or after the webinar or send us and we can get you some information on that. Basically what that says is you're part of this program, this DMPO, and that gives you the authority now to provide a larger than a 15% discount. So, but for the sake of this webinar, let's assume you're doing that and it drops your $70 down to 56. So 20% off of 70 drops it to 56 times your 30 visits came to 1680. Now, that still can be paid per visit, meaning when you're doing a DMPO discount or you're doing a discount like this, generally that means the person can still pay one visit at a time. So what we do in order to incentivize a patient to go onto a care plan is we apply our prompt pay discount on top of it. So this is how you legally get your fee. And let me clarify, generally what we want to do in the model is your fee is going to be up here so that if you're doing your PI, if you're still doing insurance or anything, you're still getting properly compensated for those cases. But then for your patients who are paying out of pocket, you're able to legally provide a compliant discount all the way down to a level that's more affordable for those people to pay out of pocket. And here's the thing, when we do care plans, the intention is that you're packaging care together and people do expect there to be a discount. They do. It's no different than when people buy anything, business cards. Doctor, you go buy business cards, you expect that if you're going to buy 100 of them, you're going to pay more per business card versus if you're going to buy 1,000 of them or 5,000 of them. The larger the quantity, you expect the cost to go down. It's no different than with our services. When you package it together, generally there's an expectation that there's going to be some kind of discount. And not only is there, whether there's an expectation or not, the bottom line is it works really well when you do this from a business perspective. When you package your services, you provide a compliant discount on the services, it makes it easy for people to say yes to cares in essence. So you're seeing in this example, I took the $70 fee, I was able to get it all the way down to $47.60 per visit in a legal way, times 30 visits, dropped it all the way down to $14.28. Again, this is just for illustration purposes. It's going to be different in your office, depending on what you charge, how many services you're recommending, what levels of discounts you want to do. But the point I'm making across here is that the model is you have a fee that's able to be reduced for a care plan. Once we have that reduced cost, and this is that same example here, the $14.28 I'm showing you here, I'm bringing it over here. What we're going to do now is offer it in 3 different payment options. So it's not $14.28 to prepay. That's not the scenario here. We give patients 3 choices. And these are the same 3 choices people get, whether they're buying a car, a house, expensive furniture. We don't make up chiropractic choices. What I mean by that is many chiropractors I talk to, for whatever reason, they've made up some really weird payment options that make no sense in the real world, but that's what they're doing in their practice. These are the 3 options we find works best across the board. Number 1, a monthly payment that's auto-debited. No different than your rent, no different than a mortgage, no different than buying an expensive TV or expensive furniture or a car, a monthly payment. Option 2 is a down payment with smaller monthly payments. Again, no different than buying a car, expensive furniture, all the same things. You can make a down payment and then make the monthly payments smaller. That's the second option. And quite frankly, that's our favorite option. We love that option. It's the most common chosen among our patients. And mainly because when people make a down payment, we know they're more committed. And that's one of the arguments for doing prepays is doctors will say when they prepay, they're more committed. And there's truth to that. They are more committed at the beginning of care. But at the end of the journey, at the end of the patient journey, when it's time to transition to wellness, they're actually less committed. And we want people being committed at the end of the treatment plan just as much at the beginning so they're able to easily transition. And we find a monthly payment does do that. They are more committed at the end versus the beginning. And the third option is the prepayment. And the reason I had that as a choice in there is because there are people who want to prepay. And we experimented actually in practice for a while. We had about a 6-month window where we stopped offering prepay at all. And what, to our surprise, is we found about 5%, maybe even up to 10% of patients ask to prepay. They said, can I just write you a check and pay for the whole thing? And the answer is, yeah, of course you can. Those people are the same people who walk in a car lot and prepay for a car or prepay their furniture or TVs. They don't put anything on payments. That's how they operate their life. Those people will ask to prepay, but the vast majority of people choose not to. So they end up choosing one of those first two options, and we find those three options absolutely work the best when it comes to offering an affordable care plan with convenient payment options. Now, we use software to do that, whether you do that mechanically with a calculator yourself or you handwrite it. We as a company, we offer software that does that, called our Care Plan Calculator, that makes it really easy for entering all that. And it produces an agreement, a document like you see on the screen here, where it produces a real professional document. And in fact, the fact that it's a professional document, that in itself will increase conversions at a report of findings. I know that for a fact. We've seen it routinely with our doctors. In fact, one of our recent Google reviews I was just reading last night, doctors specifically said that offering patients these care plans, we saw our conversions go up just simply offering these using these documents to do things. Let me go through in detail what we did end up doing here. This is an example where we're showing adjustments, progress exams, progress films, a healthcare class, some therapies, and we just kind of threw together a treatment plan right here. And this is an example where insurance is involved, because you'll see here we say adjustments to meet the deductible, adjustments covered by insurance, adjustments not covered by insurance, progress exams, and you'll see the number of units for each of these, the actual fees for them, the total cost, and then everything that's included in the payment plan here. And you'll see it takes a total value down here, which is the retail value of all your services, and then the discounted cost off to the right here. In this example,
I want to make sure our audience knows this is customizable. What you're showing is just an example. So if they come on board, we teach them how to plug in what they're doing and offering for their services and products and their practice, what their discounts are. So we make it really easy to get on board and get this going.
I'm glad you say that, because if you assume that you're doing the same thing for every person, then there's no need for software. You would just simply take a document, photocopy it, and use it for the same person, the same thing over and over with every person. The intention is not only do you customize it for your practice, you customize these per patient, because not every patient necessarily is going to get the same care plan. And that's one of the things I see challenging in many practices. They have care plans that every single patient goes on the same thing or something similar. And that's not realistic. What's realistic is that treatment plan should be unique to that patient, which means the financial care plan should be unique to that patient. So we custom build these for each particular person. And that's part of the patient journey. And I'll show that to you when we go back to the journey.
And we're talking, it takes seconds, under a minute to do this. Like it's
absolutely. Yeah. And generally you'll build templates of these, and you'll use these templates with patients. I'm showing you on this, let me go back to this screen. This screen here shows that everything's included. When we present these care plans to patients, this is generally the way it looks. It shows the actual fees, the total value, and then it says under the payment plan, everything's included in the discounted cost here, in the savings. For the math for you guys to see, I want you to see that there's two things I want to point out, and that is these first two lines that are insurance, adjustments to meet the deductible and adjustments covered by insurance. I want you to notice the cost of those is not discounted. As I said earlier, one of the rules is when you're building care plans, that anything that's considered covered, whether it's deductible or copays, none of those services are discounted. They're full price. And I got to emphasize that, because many doctors do these wrong. They build out these care plans and discounts are being inappropriately applied. So you want to be careful in that you make sure the discounts are only applied to the non-covered services, which is everything down below here. These are all things, let's say, that are not covered by insurance. Those are the things where, for example, the $19.50 in adjustments here reduces to $17.55, or the $4.50 drops to $4.05, as an example. So anything that should be having discounts applied or having those discounts applied, with the things that are not supposed to be discounted clearly are showing on here they're not being discounted. So that's an important thing when you're building out your care plans. And then you'll see down here, it came to the $48.50 in this case. And then that $48.50 again is going to go ahead and split into three options. It's either going to be a monthly payment. So that's what it's showing here, an initial payment followed by monthly payments, or a down payment, which you see here, followed by smaller monthly payments, or the option of a one-time payment. And you'll notice or you should notice here, each of these become a little cheaper because we give them a little bit more discount if they're doing a down payment or a prepayment. It makes, just from a business perspective, it makes sense that someone would expect to get a little bit more discount if they're putting a down payment, or a little bit more discount if they're prepaying it. And it's a small amount. It doesn't have to be a lot, but nonetheless, that's how it works out. So going back to this prior slide, total plan is calculated, then that calculated plan is split into 3 different options: a monthly, a down a monthly, or a one-time payment. When I say monthly, by the way, if you wanted to break this into weekly or bi-weekly payments, you can do that. Generally, we use monthly as our frequency, but you do have the option of using other frequencies. If any of you want a sample of what this care plan looks like, we're happy to give you one. When we're done here, go to the cashpractice.com/plans, and you'll go to a landing page, and on that landing page, there's a place for you to download a sample care plan so that you can look at it for yourself. So cashpractice.com/plans. I think Holly will put a link to that in the chat for you guys, and you can do that after we're done here. What I'm showing you on the screen right here is just an animation showing what happens when people utilize the software. When you actually enroll a patient in care and the patient signs up, it's actually a really cool process that you produce the agreement and people like electronically sign it using a digital signature. In fact, I have one right here. It looks like this device right here. People can electronically sign. And what that means is now you have a paperless office. There's no reason to have it, printed off and you're storing a document. There's nothing to scan. They electronically sign the signature, the document. It's now on file that you have this agreement authorized for you to do the monthly payments, that they've agreed to it. All the terms, the legal terms, et cetera, are now handled from the standpoint of their care plan. Now you might print a copy off to give them, or you can email them that, a PDF of it as an example. But the point is that you now electronically have a copy of their signature signed on the agreement, and you're off and running. And that's how cool it is. So what I just showed you just now was these last 2, convenience and a game plan. What I mean by that is the game plan was the production of the agreement, the care plan, the actual document for doing that. That is the game plan from a business perspective or a payment plans perspective. You also want to have a game plan for their scheduling. Now, we don't do scheduling. You do that through your EHR program, but generally from a scheduling perspective, you want to have a game plan. They're coming 3 days a week and et cetera. You have that scheduled out. But you've given them a game plan for their payments, and you've made it convenient. What I mean by convenient in this case is their payments are automated. You made it really easy for them to enroll, and you made it easy for them to stay because the payment is now an automated thing. And not only is it automated, not only is that during the course of care, if for whatever reason a payment declines, it's going to automatically send them an email to go ahead and update their billing for them to make payment. It's just super easy for them to be participating in the financial aspects of your practice. So you've made the payments convenient, easy, and frictionless, as we like to say, and you've done a game plan by doing that. Going back to the patient journey, you'll see the steps we outlined here as step 5, which was setting the game plan. Basically what ends up happening is the CA will generally be the one who creates the care plan, the financial plan. Now, when I say creates it, usually when you're using this, you'll set up pre-made game plans or pre-made care plans in advance, and you'll have these templates. And I'll say to Holly, hey, Holly, we're using template number 2, or whatever it is, and she'll know to go ahead and build out that care plan for that patient. She may need to add in any insurance per se that may be unique to that person, but nonetheless, it's being prepared prior to a report of findings. That's what's happening on step 5 of the game plan. Step 6 represents me as the doctor reviewing the treatment plan and potentially even the game plan, but usually the CA is going to go over the financial plan. But this is basically represents the report of findings. That's what we're doing here. I'm using a case, in this case, a scoring mechanism we call the wellness score to show the patient the need for care. Once they agree to treatment, then Holly or the CA is going to go in with the financial plan, the care plan, and review that with the patient to get the yes. And what step 7 represents here is the actual enrollment, where the CA is interacting with the patient and doing the actual sign-up process of enrolling them in it. And those are the 3 steps along this journey. Where you see the danger signal here, what that's basically representing is if you didn't offer the patient a care plan, or you didn't offer them payment options, or you didn't do a good clinical report of findings. There's many things that can lead to the patient. I'm sure you've all had this happen, where you do a report of findings and the patient says, let me think about it, or I'll get back to you, that type of thing. That's the danger. And there's things that are not being done properly in a report of findings generally that's going to lead to that. And I should bring up, there are things that we teach you. If you were a client of Cash Practice, we have a whole academy on day 1, day 2, on how do you properly get a yes to a report of findings. So this is the kind of the journey, but there's many things that go along in the journey to accomplish these successfully. So emphasize again, game plan. I'll just review this again. This is the CA, in this case, Holly, in this case, doing step 5, preparing the financial report of the financial document, the care plan. Okay. Step 6 is sharing the results with the patient. That's your traditional report of findings. And then step 7 is now the review of actually enrolling the patient in care. Those are those steps along the patient journey here. And as I shared with you earlier, when you focus on the patient journey and have a great patient journey, that's what will lead to patient loyalty, which will ultimately lead to success in the practice. So I also want to mention before we wrap up here, we said there's 4 pillars and we talked about convenience and a game plan. I just want to briefly mention contact and feedback. They are important, but I don't want to leave those out since the whole title of this topic was the 4 steps you can do to reduce patient dropout. So I don't want to leave out the other 2. Contact. Well, there's lots of things you could do to stay in contact with me. There's many things we do, and this is traditionally our patient education, whether that be table talk with a patient, whether that be the posters you have up in your office, whether that be the new patient workshops you do, whether that be the emails you send out, whether that be the TVs throughout your office, educating your patients. I know in my practice, we had TVs all over the place. We even had one in the bathroom for people to look at. And I know people looked at it because they'd come out of the bathroom asking questions about what they read on the TV. So there's lots of things you could do to be educating your patients about the benefits of chiropractic. And we have a system at Cashpractice. It's one of the things you'll use as a regular email marketing platform. If you could think of like a Infusionsoft or MailChimp, those types of programs, it's competitive with that type of product, except ours comes pre-built with chiropractic content in it. So when you're utilizing our Drip Ed system, which is what it's called, you don't have to create the content. It's actually in there. And we're actually right now building out a lot of new content to use throughout the patient journey. Most of the content we've had in there has been mainly for the new patient. We're adding a lot of stuff in there for, actually, I shouldn't say new patient. We have stuff that's for when they're on the treatment plan, but we are building out a whole set of campaigns to use throughout the whole patient journey right now. And that's an example in the software we have that allows you to do these campaigns of emails. And all of the software is under one platform, which is really kind of cool. It's all under one database. Which means you're not using a separate system for email and a separate system for care plans and a separate system for payment processing. It's all under one database, which means the patients are, whatever patients you have in there for one system are being used, can be used for others. The feedback pillar that we have is simply our wellness score. This is a tool to basically make it really easy for you to communicate to patients how they're doing. And what I mean by making it easy is everybody knows what a letter grade means. We all got report cards, right? Growing up, we clearly know what a D means, a B, a C, an A. So what we've done is we've basically created a report card for you to add in your clinical findings. You add in your measurements, your anterior head syndrome, your neck disability index, your oswestry, your core score, your how many subluxations, cervical curve angle you see in here. And we literally have dozens and dozens of different parameters you can pick and measure. We don't define what you measure. You choose what you want to measure. And the system will automatically score it for you. And imagine showing your patient over the course of time, hey, you went from a D to a C to an A. And this is one of the challenges doctors face ongoing with patients is as patients are feeling better, they don't know that they're continuing to need care, or they don't know they're progressing. They're like, I feel better. So why do I keep coming in? Like the whole notion here is over time, you're showing them, hey, you were maybe at the time they had a C, they're feeling better. And you're like, hey, I know you're feeling better, but you're still on an A, you're at a C, and we still have room to grow. And you're able to demonstrate to them over time how they're progressing. We have reports all the time from doctors saying how effective this is to help them communicate to patients the need for care at a report of findings. Imagine saying at a report of findings, you're a D, D minus. The response you get from patients it's very fascinating. You go from having a patient who says, Doc, what do you have to do to get rid of my neck pain, to a patient saying, well, Doc, what do I have to do to get an A? And that changes the conversation at a report of findings. And now along the course of care, you're able to communicate the progress they're making through reporting back to them, how their grade is changing. It's a really effective tool of giving patients feedback. There's lots of things you could do to get feedback, whether it be regular x-rays, whether it be EMG scans, posture pictures. There's all these things you can do, but you can summarize it all by putting it into the wellness score and giving them a report card with a letter grade, including everything you do, whether that be outcome assessment tools, whether it be your number of palpation, subluxations you palpate, whatever it is, you can plug it into the system and it's going to give you a mechanism for reporting that. And that's called our wellness score. And again, that's a piece of software we have, and it lets you show patients over time how they're progressing. Really effective tool if you use it appropriately. Now, we're going to wrap up here, and I want to wrap up with this here, and then I'll see potentially if there's any questions that came in that Holly can report to me. 21%, what does that represent? Where does that number come from? Well, this is a representation of simply the annual rate of growth our doctors experience on average during their first 3 years of implementing the systems. If you implement these 4 concepts using our systems, we've seen across the board, and we have thousands of members, on average, they grow 21% per year, year after year, over the course of 3 years. So this isn't something you get a little bit of improvement. It's not something that's, I showed you that chart before of the bar graphs of, the collections going. Imagine any kind of investment you do growing 21% year after year. It's actually pretty remarkable. And I share that with you because that's ultimately what you should expect if you were to be working, utilizing our systems. And I mentioned earlier, if you want to get an example, copy of one of these care plans, again, go to this website here, this URL, cashpractice.com/plans, and you'll see there's a landing page. You can put in your information. It'll email you a link. You'll also see at the top a place called Book a Call. If you want to speak with us and get a demonstration of how the software works, if you have questions for us, whatever it may be, just click on that Book a Call. It will bring up a calendar where you could book your own time, and one of our Cash Practice experts will speak with you over the phone and answer your questions, whatever it may be. And if they don't know the answer, they'll get the answer for you, and they'll be happy to show you how the software works if that's something you're interested in.